This story is about the daughter of the greatest saint in the empire. Her name is Avnir Sakrin. The saint is a maiden recognized by the gods and possesses incredible sacred powers. Since her mother died of a terminal illness, there has been no one worthy to take her place for a long time. That's why the girl herself dreamed of becoming a saint, and following in her footsteps, she devoted a lot of time to it, read books, and in general, this is her meaning and purpose of life in general. On one of the most beautiful days of her life, when the girl felt that her mother's strength had been passed on to her after all, she was the happiest person in the world. Then her dream came true. The girl could not be happy that she no longer has to learn from scratch. She already has these tasks. The main thing is to develop and strengthen strength. When she learned that she had holy powers, she was immediately recognized as a candidate for sainthood. Anyone wishing to become a full-fledged saint must leave their home and give themselves to service and life in the temple. Despite the fact that she was only 10 years old, there was no need to leave her parents' house. Even at that age, she knew that she had to move on, and if she stayed where she was, she would regret it very much. Avenir was determined to overcome all adversity and become a saint, following in the footsteps of her wonderful mom. But at the time, she had no idea how complicated it would be. And not as fast as it seemed, the girl had only learned over time that having powers was not enough, had to suffer a lot, overcoming pain, suffering, doubts, but it's still not enough. One day, she even had the idea to give it all up. But when she remembers her mother, these thoughts dissolve like a fog. Then she even gets angry and resents herself for having such thoughts at all. All the time when a girl is trying to reach her dream, she doesn't stop being discussed. Rumors are getting bigger and bigger every day. People are interested in talking about this topic and expressing what anyone thinks about her. They don't like that she spends too much time on it, tries to read prayers just to become the best. And of course, in their opinion, her actions will lead to nothing good. But this is the opinion of envious people, who don't even approximately understand what the girl feels at this moment and what she had to go through. All they want to do is discuss her life they know nothing about. It's easier for them to just laugh on the sidelines, even though that time could have been spent doing the same thing to keep up with her. Avenir tries her best to ignore those conversations, though most of the time, those girls don't even try to keep their voices down. They make sure she knows how they feel about her. It's strange that everyone discusses and dislikes her, but at the same time, these same classmates do nothing to be at least on her level. They often skip classes and take this case far from seriously. They're not trying to become saints, and for Avenir, she always wondered if they didn't want to become saints, why they were judging her and seeing her as a competitor. Meanwhile, when she had some free time, the girl went outside, and some guy came up to her. He addressed her by name, which means they know each other. He has very nice clothes, and overall, he looks like a teacher or one of the saints, but that's only at first glance. Maybe he's a student just like her. He came over just to say hello and noticed how hard she was trying today. Her breathing was rapid, so of course he advised her to take a break and recover a bit. In response, she addressed him by name and thanked him for his concern. Turns out it was Mr. Rasol, one of the few people who treats her well. And that's not all. He is the man without whom she would never have achieved what she has now. She would have given up a long time ago and would have been among those girls who will never become saints. And he is also her lover. She has had feelings for him from the very first meeting. When he is near, the girl feels incredibly calm and forgets about all the bad things. She is grateful to him a lot and of course very happy to see him. Although they rarely talk about relationships in the future, but now, surprisingly, he suddenly wants to discuss something. He says that he is not concerned about the development of powers, but about what will happen after the end of the ministry between the two of them. The only thing he wants his beloved to always know is that if suddenly they have some obstacles or have to separate for a while, it will not affect anything. He will always be there for her and will not give her to anyone. Saints and candidates for sainthood ended their ministry when they reached the age of 20. This is because their powers of sainthood begin to wane. Katya Matushka retained her power even after her ministry ended and she had a child. Most become ordinary women once they reach their 20s. The girl is sure that she will have a happy family life at the end, especially with such a young man. She is not afraid of anything. She is sure in his loyalty and words. With him, she dreams to spend the rest of her life and create a beautiful family. As usual, he starts to tell and warns that a lot of people treat her unkindly, since the girl is the closest to becoming a saint. In such a position, it is very hard not to run into someone with impure intentions. Of course he will try to help. But he would also be calm so that she also understands this and does not trust the people around her. In general, the guy asks her to trust only him and no one else. Otherwise, there will be problems that can interfere with their happy future. Every time Avenir hears this, she is very happy that she has the person she needs with her. She feels protected and wishes it could be that way forever. Everything went her way until one day her life changed dramatically. Her cousin Floria became a candidate for sainthood. She was a commoner herself, but thanks to the influence of the Avenir family, she was able to move to the capital and live in the temple. With her lively personality, bird-like voice, and charming gestures, unlike Avenir, who resembled her father, she was full of qualities that reminded others of her mother's, especially her beautiful shining golden hair just like her mom's. The girl is very proud of it, and of course her looks help a lot with that. Because of these strong memories, she wanted to get close to her, and just 3 years later, she did. The sister herself tries to talk every time she gets the chance. She doesn't socialize with the others and gives all her time to Avenir, which was very unexpected, as is usually the case. After her sister's arrival, the others started discussing them and created rumors. Supposedly, Avenir purposely talks to her sister a lot of the time to take away her power. That's where it ended today. Rumors have also reached the fact that she is seeing some man at night. For many, it is incomprehensible how after this she can even consider herself a saint. The girl couldn't understand why all the attention was on her. She hadn't done anything bad to anyone, and in general, she judged by herself, because she would never be interested in someone else's life so much to discuss anything all day long and spread rumors. At least she didn't have time for that. Didn't have. At such moments, she immediately recalls the words of her lover, who never tires of reminding her that if she succumbs to their influence, she will never become a saint. So, should ignore everything around her and trust only him. In fact, after he so insistently asks for it, there are thoughts and assumptions that he may be hiding his real face and also using a gullible girl for his own purposes. But this is only a guess. Avenir has no doubt that as long as her sister and Mr. Resolve are by her side, everything will definitely be fine and there is nothing to worry about. But there is one thing that is impossible not to think about. Floria is an excellent candidate for sainthood, and as soon as she got here, the gentleman suspiciously started spending more time with her than with his girlfriend. Of course, there's nothing wrong with them getting to know each other, but every day, things get very suspicious. When a girl sees them together, she feels uncomfortable. Something inside as if warns her that it doesn't mean anything good and she has to be on guard. But at the same time, she can't believe that she has to worry about it at all, because they are the closest and most loyal people who can't do that. Very good trait of her character is that she never likes to wait, so the girl came up at once and determined to find out everything. She explained that she sees him more and more often with her sister, and it's very upsetting that she has thoughts that they're not just socializing, but that they have some kind of mutual affection that could hurt their relationship. To which he replies that the only and unique for him has always been only her. Then, he asked not to upset him, because meetings with other candidates for him in the order of things, and it supposedly does not mean anything. He then asked us not to fill our heads with unnecessary thoughts and not to forget our goal of becoming a saint. She replied that she wouldn't talk to him about it anymore, but in fact, there was still a feeling inside that he wasn't telling her something. He reacted as if it was her fault and didn't even try to explain. In the end, Avenir stopped thinking about it, because she thought it was really unnecessary to worry. The kind sister would never take away the person she loved. The girl continued to believe it, until in an instant everything changed dramatically. She wasn't prepared for it, and didn't quite understand what it was all about or how it was possible. She was suddenly detained in a horrible accusation. What with the locals getting smaller by the day, she heard those words and couldn't believe that anyone could even think that about her. It was more like a joke or a betrayal. She knows she had nothing to do with that. The worst thing was when no one would even listen to her. It was as if they had all the evidence, but no one showed it. Avenir began to panic because there was no one to turn to for help, or rather, there was no time. She tried her best to get out, but they blocked any movement so she wouldn't go anywhere. This morning, she had no idea how the day would end, and she didn't think that someone had prepared such an unpleasant surprise for her. But now, she wouldn't even know who had done it. She has no way of contacting anyone. She is locked in a very dark and cold room. There is not even a bed or a chair to avoid lying on the cold floor. The environment is depressing and only the thought of her lover can still give her some comfort. If Mr. Resolute comes, this misunderstanding will be resolved. He will certainly help her. At least she would like to hope so. It will take time for him to notice the missing, so she has one last hope left. After literally hours of being in this confined space and finally being approached by these two, the girl is not even surprised. Her sister immediately runs up to her and rejoices that she's okay, but even now, Aunir sensed that they were holding back on something. She is very grateful that her sister was worried, but Aunir is upset by the fact that she doesn't see anything from her lover. He seems to have cooled down, and in general, after the appearance of her sister, he didn't look like himself and started to appear much less. He used to come several times a day, but now it's not like that anymore. Suddenly, the trouble did not end there. The girl felt a terrible feeling, as if something was leaving her, and as it turned out, she began to lose her strength, and so quickly that she did not even realize how it happened. It was the first time she had ever felt this way. It was unbearable and impossible to put into words. Aunir didn't know what to focus on or what was going on in her life. The problems were increasing every day. And the most frustrating thing is that she doesn't even know what it's about. She has a lot of enemies, and it's possible that it's their doing. At the very moment when she couldn't stand it anymore and fell on the floor, those two started laughing, as if everything was going according to plan. They weren't scared. On the contrary, they looked at each other and thought of leaving. The girl somehow miraculously noticed it and directly asked what they did to her. She realizes that everything is obvious and would like to know the truth. She has nothing to lose anymore anyway. In response, their smiles only grew stronger. They began to thank her. And her sister admitted that she was the one who had just taken all her powers from her, and explained that she needed them more right now. After that, her world literally turned upside down. It turns out that the people she trusted the most turned out to be the very enemies that are even worse than the envious. Since they have nothing to hide anymore, the guy told her that she was too easy to control, and everything turned out much faster than he had planned. He told her how much he needed her to go, and how happy he was when he managed not to see her for at least a few days. Aunir would remember those smiles for a long time. Now she realized that she had to listen only to herself. Otherwise, she could make a huge mistake and lose her dreams. They took turns telling her how naive she was for believing every word. So let her not be surprised that her powers now belong to her sister, who turned out to be much smarter and more cunning. In fact, all of what they had just said, she hadn't heard a single word. She had just seen those sinister smiles and still hadn't been able to realize what had happened or when she had managed to be taken advantage of. It wouldn't be surprising if they were the ones who made her end up in that dungeon, though it was probably just a coincidence. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. Now she needs to learn a lesson that her life depends only on her, and when she thinks something is wrong, she needs to check it out and not blindly believe every word, even from the closest person. How she hated to remember all those words of the gentleman who told her he couldn't live without her and would make her the happiest of all. Really want to ask a lot of questions, but from the looks of it, there was no point anymore. These people had turned out to be traitors who no longer deserved a second of her attention. Avenir just doesn't see herself from the outside and doesn't realize how cruel they've been to her. The girl tries to ask them to stay to talk and spends her energy expressing how hurt she is, even though that's exactly what it absolutely doesn't matter. Those words only make them happy. Even the guy couldn't help himself and explained that she was trying to figure things out, but if he were in her shoes, he would just sit back and not want to look in their direction. It's unclear what she's trying to do, because the best thing to do is to just forget them once and for all, start a new life, and learn this lesson. The Lord confessed that when he found out that her sister had a much better chance of becoming a saint, and when he discerned a prettier girl in her, he forgot about the Avnir the same day. And as it turned out, it was much easier than he thought it would be. He even asked her who, in her opinion, was the most beautiful, her sister or her, with a hint that everything was obvious and she could not even answer this question. Listening to these words was simply unbearable. The girl for many years was sure that he admired her, and he did not need anyone else. And the sister is only happy about it. She always liked to receive compliments and knew perfectly well that she was much prettier and better in absolutely everything than her sister. Lastly, the boy said one more thing that made it easy for him to forget about her. She was always too serious. Even getting a kiss from such a saint was a challenge. And just as a woman, he had always thought her very dull and unremarkable. Now he had no idea that those words hurt her far more than anything physical. In his opinion, her existence in this world can only be justified by the fact that she has a powerful force, and that's all she can be useful for. Otherwise, she's useless. Right after that, they smiled again and said goodbye once and for all. Now they would never see each other again. She would be left to her own devices with new problems, and they would have the same beautiful future he had promised her all along. Avenir is still unable to realize that this is not a dream, but a reality that has to be accepted, preferably right now. That's how she was left alone, locked up, taken advantage of by the closest people she didn't expect this from. If someone else had done it, it wouldn't have been as hurtful as it was from them. The girl spent the whole night here. She didn't notice how she fell asleep. She was in tears, and in general, she didn't care about her life. Her power was taken away, her loved one, her sister. There was nothing and no one left. She didn't even mind the fact that she would have to sleep on the floor. It was so cold here that it would be easier to fall asleep standing up than touching this cold material. But she didn't seem to care about that. She didn't care about her health or anything else around her. Avenir didn't even wake up before someone came to her. At first, she didn't see the person, but looking at the silhouette, she realized that it was the girl she wanted to see the least, and it was strange that she was here at all. Her sister came to see her. She tells her how wonderful they feel. But if Avenir wanted to say anything back, she warned that she didn't care about that. She didn't even want to hear anything about it. Floria explained why she was so happy. Because it was very easy for her to take away everything she had planned all this time, and to be honest, she had hated her sister since a long time ago. She only now admitted it. It used to be very hard for her to play the role of a loving sister, which was far from reality. They have always been compared, and according to her, her sister can't even imagine how much she is overwhelmed by the joy of getting rid of all these problems. She got what she wanted, and now she can hide nothing and be herself. And even now, Avenir thinks that her sister will soon change her mind and apologize. For she can't be so cruel, and she couldn't be so wrong about people, except that the longer she thinks like that, the more time will be lost in them. She begins to remind them that it is wrong to do so, that the Almighty is watching their every move, and that in the future, everything will be paid for every bad deed, especially in relation to their relatives. Every day since becoming a candidate saint has been devoted to study. She has not returned home, and her communication with her father has been minimal, although her father was on good terms with Floria. He won't allow abuse towards Avenir. The girl is sure of that. He'll definitely investigate, and all of a sudden everyone who does will be sorry. In response, the sister asks what kind of person she thinks she is. She smiled and said that of course she had taken care of everything long ago, so her family was going to end, and soon, much sooner than she thought. The girl starts screaming very loudly and saying that this can't be happening. She demanded to know what the one did to her father and reminded that he actually treated both of them well. Accordingly, the sister had no reason to harm him. The girl does not understand whether she really decided to do that to him, despite all his kindness and what he did for her. To something that, if the Secret family hadn't ceased to exist, she wouldn't have been able to get rid of it completely, which means she destroyed the man after all, and didn't even think it was unnecessary to say that he mentioned the name of his beloved daughter until the very end, until he died. The girl made sure that he was punished for everything that Avenir did. She is being held here and he is being punished. Avenir heard these words and was speechless. She doesn't understand how people can be so cruel. But that wasn't all. The sister told me what about the rest of the family. They were also destroyed as having spawned a wicked woman who had tarnished the name of the saints. It's as if she enjoys telling this dark story. It's as if she's proud of herself and wanted to do it a long time ago. But she could only do it now. She enjoys watching the tears of her sister, who realizes that her father can't come back. Moreover, she was not afraid to say that Avenir would soon follow him, and this was the last straw of her patience. She tried to grab her hair but failed. The girl reacted in time and stepped aside, and when Avenir's hand was on the floor, her sister stealthily approached her and stepped on her answer. It was so painful that it simply cannot be conveyed in words. Floria did not let go for a long time yet to punish her sister properly. For the future, the villainous sister warned that she can't do anything anyway. Her plan is so well thought out that Avenir won't last more than a few days. She's already taken care of everything, and there's no way to change the outcome, no matter how much she wants to. She'll be looking forward to it. And also, she's asked Avenir to try to show herself as frustrated with hopelessness as possible for the last time. because she really likes to watch her like that. After this conversation, the girl was in no mood. She realized that nothing good was waiting for her, and the only thing that could save her was a miracle. Sister wanted to get rid of her so quickly that she didn't wait and arranged a farewell right this evening. She had prepared everything necessary and told the locals about the coming, who I would love to see the performance. Everyone came in a good mood. People are just waiting for the moment when finally, one problem in their lives will become one less. They started calling Aonir a horrible person to make her feel ashamed, yet she hasn't done a single bad thing in her entire life, but no one cares about that. It was only now that she began to realize how cruelly she had been treated. She began to resent herself for blindly trusting those who sought only gain in her, and also that she constantly neglected what she really needed to value, at least freedom, which was just yesterday morning. The girl began to cry because she had failed not only herself, but also her father. When she was little, she immediately decided that she would become just like her beloved mother. She was an example for her, an inspiration, and not only. The little girl constantly said that she wanted to become like her mother. The woman always believed in her and did not doubt that everything would work out. She was very pleased with the wonderful admiration of her daughter. Meanwhile, the life of this beautiful girl who just wanted to follow in her mom's footsteps could be cut short like this in a matter of minutes. Her biggest traitors are watching. They can't be happy that it worked out, and they didn't even feel her power like they thought they would. Even now, they continue to compare her to a child who doesn't yet understand how the world works and trusts people easily. At this very last moment in her life, she screamed very loudly that she hates everyone who came to laugh and support the event. The girl is humbled and realizes that there is no turning back. She will simply not be allowed to survive. Just a moment later, as she waited for her doom, the girl heard someone's beautiful voice. It addressed her as the daughter of the great Saint Felicia. Then a very bright light appeared, and as she tries to focus her vision and see things around her, she hears that she's been given a chance to start over. And it turns out that this chance was given for a reason. It was a request of her mom, who is outraged by this injustice. And of course, her wish was heard. This voice that's talking to her now, it's saying that it's giving her a chance to start her life over and go through her journey again, if she wants to, but she also has a chance to stay in heaven, so it's her choice. She says she has no plans to stay here and wants a fresh start, unless, of course, she's being tricked again. The girl cannot forgive the way those people acted to her. She wants to take revenge on each of them and to make sure that nothing like that happens again. And of course, she's very grateful for the opportunity. But so far, because of the surprise, she hasn't been able to say so. At the same time, the question arises whether revenge is something forbidden for the aspiring saint, or whether in her case it is permissible after all. Avenir simultaneously wants to be herself, but at the same time, there's no way she can ignore the betrayal and really wants to ruin their lives at least a little bit. That voice replies that it depends on her, because the qualities of a saint are not only based on her traits. She has the right to seek justice, especially if she herself has suffered and does not deserve bad things to happen to her. Then, the voice says that it looks like their time is coming to an end. He has ordered her to change her fate and walk the path of life with no regrets. That was the last thing she heard. The girl finds herself in a room, on some kind of bed, as if she's just about to wake up, and it's a very ordinary day like everyone else's. She recognized this room at once. She had lived here all the time. She knew every corner of the room and recognized this place even by the smell. It was nothing difficult. It was very interesting where Aonir would start the day. She had many possibilities. Moreover, she already knew the people around her and what they were capable of. She began to look at herself in the mirror. Though nothing had changed in her appearance, everything was the same as it had been. Then she thanked the Almighty, because if it wasn't for him, she would never have had this opportunity, and of course, her mom had played a big part in it. Avenir came back here with two goals. She wants to take revenge and ruin the lives of her enemies, and of course to make this life better than the first time. Now she will only think about herself, and will think 1,000 times before she trusts or believes in someone else. She began to carefully analyze everything that had happened to her lately. She needed to remember all the traps she could fall into. After all, there was no telling what time she was in and how long she had until they wanted to apprehend her. The worst moment to avoid is going to the dungeon, where she is taken away from all her strength and left with nothing, all alone and frustrated. It is very good that she has returned to a time when she has her strength with her, and she will never let those events happen again. Everything will be exactly the opposite and no one will dare to take advantage of her. At some point, one of the assistants knocked on the room. The girl pretended to think nothing of it, just allowed entry, and asked what was wrong. It was Linda. She had just come to see if the mistress was awake or not, so she would know when to start making breakfast. Her appearance is very nostalgic for the times when everything was good. Her mind immediately goes back to the time when those nightmarish events happened to her. The environment was completely different than it is now. It is very good that for now, the girl is safe, and she has time to think things over. She knows exactly what to prepare for, so it's best to start coming up with a plan as soon as possible. The assistant brought a warm blanket, as it is getting colder and we need to remember to stay warm. The girl thanked and said it was very timely. She was not used to looking at the people around her now. All this time it seemed that only Risol and Floria were on her side. But as it turned out, really kind and good people she just did not notice, and communicated only with enemies, with whom it was dangerous even to be in the same room. She can't make the same mistakes. She needs to find new allies. And as soon as possible, she didn't miss the opportunity, and since the assistant is already here, she asked her where she was from. The assistant didn't expect such a question, so the girl apologized in advance and said she understood that they hadn't talked about such topics before, and then explained that she had just always taken care of her, and mistress had not reacted to it in any way. She hadn't learned anything about her in so long, though it would have been nice to have. The girl warned that if she didn't feel like it, Linda didn't have to tell her anything. She just wanted to say that she was grateful for everything she had done for her. She knows it sounds very strange and unexpected, but she reiterated that these are completely sincere words with no catch in them whatsoever. Linda had no time to reply before an assistant came into the room and informed her that Mr. Rasol wished to speak to the Onir. The girl replied that she would try to come as soon as possible and asked me to tell you that it wouldn't take more than 10 minutes. She's very afraid to meet this man, especially after everything she saw him last time. Honestly, she doesn't even want to see his face, much less talk about anything and pretend like everything is fine. But she can't just run away and ignore him either. In that case, since she had little time left, the mistress turned to her assistant and began to hope for her understanding. She said that before she met with Mr. Rasol, she wanted to ask one favor that only she could do. She asked her to listen carefully to everything she was about to tell her and explained how important it was. A few minutes later, the girl was already in his office, and before coming in here, it took her a lot of time and energy to get herself in the mood for this meeting. He greeted her and told her that today he had a small request. As usual, though the girl just didn't pay attention to it before. He wanted to ask her to replenish the power of the magic tools. Everything should be done as usual. Since the girl had already decided that he wasn't going to get anything from her, she pretended to feel bad, apologized and hinted that she'd love to help, but just not today, or even anytime soon. In her past life, she fulfilled any request, even if she had to use her strength to the limit, and it was not necessary for candidates for sainthood. Onir was afraid of upsetting and offending her lover, so she never refused him anything. He was the only person from whom she didn't expect any trickery and thought that if he asked for something, it was really important to him and she should help him. But now, it is very good that Avnir realized that most likely, all her efforts and actions were used to commit deceitful acts in her own direction. It turns out that she fell in love with herself, trusting this man, but now it is necessary to avoid manipulating her with all her might. The guy had never heard her say no, and now he didn't quite understand how that was possible. His confident smile was gone, because before he could make her do anything, even when she was very sick and her strength was running out. You'd think that would be the end of the conversation, he wouldn't insist. And of course, he'd offer to rest or whatever it takes to get her back on her feet. But no, he doesn't care about that at all. The manipulation continues. He starts asking provocative questions. Supposedly, she is so bad that she can't do such an easy job for him. Onir catches him at it again and is very glad that she finally got to know this person better. It is much easier to understand how to behave now. This time it will be different. He won't get any more use out of her. You have to try to distance yourself from his influence and not give in to these manipulations. The main thing is to do everything carefully and pretend that she is still very naive and loves him. But today, it was just bad luck. The girl explained that she is very careful about her health and does not want to overwork because he has, and there are acquaintances who can help him in this way. And it doesn't stop him. The guy keeps smiling as if everything is under control, but it's far from it. He doesn't even realize that no matter how hard he tries, she's already a completely different person, from whom he won't get anything anymore. There will be no more understanding and support from her side. Not to be blunt, she begins to connect her refusal with becoming a saint. Therefore, it is better for her not to spend her time on the fulfillment of others. Everything should be directed to her own development in order to come to the goal as soon as possible. And lastly, she had prepared a phrase to which he would certainly not be able to reply, namely, that if he really cherished her, he should understand and not hinder the fulfillment of her dream. At the same time, she wants to find out if he saw her as just a tool to fulfill his own desires before her sister showed up, or if it was after they met Floria. As Aunir had expected, there was no more manipulation. He only asked what had happened to her, and if someone had said something bad to her, or if she might have been offended by something. She answered nothing to this, and he says that, as he thought, the girl is very easily influenced by others, though it is very funny to hear this, because he himself has been trying to influence her for so many years, and does it even now. Apparently the guy hasn't realized that it's okay to not try anymore. He keeps talking and reminding her how many times he's told her it would be better if she didn't get too attached to anyone but him. In that case, Aunir wasn't shy and refused to do as he says. She explained that it's hard to be in a lonely confinement, and from now on she wants more contact with others, even if he doesn't like it. He immediately let her go, stopped hugging her and changed his gaze. But for the girl, I want to be very happy. She is making progress and is not afraid of his reaction, doing everything exactly as she planned it. Mr. still thinks that maybe she is just in a bad mood and doesn't want to listen to anyone. So he repeated that she should still listen to him and not think about others, because no one but him wishes her well. He is supposedly the only one she can count on. After that, the girl is already angry. She doesn't understand why he is so stubborn and as if he doesn't hear her words. She's already repeated several times that from this day, everything will change. She wants to change her life and is tired of sticking to some rules. Aunir looked at him with a dissatisfied look. Though she did it on purpose and asked why he always behaves like that and doesn't allow her to do anything. She also wanted to communicate with people and not feel lonely, because it turned out that lately she had been communicating only with him. The girl remembered her sister who often shed tears, if you recall. They looked fake on the surface. This child was much more cunning than one would think, and it was incomprehensible how the others believed her. It will help her to pave a new path and avoid repeating her fate. Avenir will use the means available to his beloved, but sooner or later he will take revenge on each of them. At last the gentleman could not stand it any longer and began to behave very intemperately. He begins to resent, as if he was doing everything for her own good, and she in return could not even help with this small matter. He even grabbed her hand hard and didn't even notice when it happened. The girl started yelling at him and demanded some respect. He has no right to act like that towards her. The situation was very awkward, and at that moment the assistants came in. The gentleman could not control himself. He was confused and realized that he had called her for nothing. The assistants went into his office, and since they had never seen him hold someone's hand so tightly and composed to do something, they were frightened and asked what was going on here. They were confused by the fact that he was doing it towards a saint. Everyone starts looking at each other with surprised eyes, and no one knows what to say in such a situation. Since they're already here, of course they apologized for disturbing him, because they didn't know he had an important conversation. Usually when the door is open, it means it's okay to come in, and most likely he just forgot about it, and it's his own fault that it happened like that. One of them thought it would be a good idea to get Mrs. Avenir out of here. In her opinion, it was the best thing to do since she was being grabbed by the arm. She probably didn't mind the help, obviously. The assistant said that the lady was tired, so she wanted to suggest that she rest and escort her to her room. She reminded her that saint candidates have many responsibilities and should never be allowed to become exhausted. Of course, the gentleman no longer resisted. He allowed them to do so, and he did not even conceal his anger. Right after they all could be said to have rescued the mistress, they began to ask what it had just been, and warned her that if it happened again, she could always count on their help and call at any time. The girl replied that they all helped her out a lot and came in very timely. If it wasn't for the deputy, there's no telling what he could have done to her. She thanked them profusely for that and promised that she would now go back to her room and try to regain her strength as they had advised her to do. But they all got so excited that they suggested we all go together so that no way, no how, he wouldn't come back and try to go on. In this way, Aonir realized. She had reliable helpers who would be on her side in any situation. She was very pleased that no one was afraid and saved her even from her lord. Despite the huge risk of losing their jobs, they did it, and their conscience remained clear. Thanks to this, the girl realized that even assistants, even though they are strangers to her, can be trusted much more than her former lover. At least he will never be like that again. For now, she has the next stage. She has to somehow outsmart him before her sister shows up, and it seems like it's going to be a lot easier than it may seem. She's literally halfway there already. Now he saw that she wasn't as easily manipulated as she had been before. The girl was now thinking not only of him, but also of herself. Everything before that, their relationship was like that of master and servant. But it was necessary to change his behavior a little, and everything immediately became normal. It's a pity that the girl did not think of it earlier. It was hard to say that she had assumed such a thing. However, this was the first time she had seen such behavior on his part. Now she was even more eager to avoid this man. When she said she wanted to be with other people and not just him, and then this happened. Aonir didn't know who else to talk to about it, so told Linda, who seemed very understanding. The girl asked if she wouldn't mind them communicating periodically, if it wouldn't bother her, of course. Assistant happily agreed. She looks very pleased, like she's always wanted to and was afraid to suggest it. They chatted some more. It looked very nice. It was exactly what she had been missing so much. The girl felt close to her friend and some kind of freedom, which was very unfamiliar for now. She never thought it would be so easy. It just required trusting people less and thinking about herself. As many people already know, candidates for sainthood with divine powers have a number of different responsibilities. For example, you have to heal the wounded every day or set up barriers to maintain the country's defenses. It's very important, and there are no days off. Aonir had recently tried to use her powers to heal the scars she had received from the Rezalon. At this time, the girl tried to talk to someone other than Linda, but to no avail. She was having none of it. It is impossible to change people's attitudes towards herself at the same time. Especially, she should not underestimate the charm of Floria, her sister, who is very easy to instill confidence in anyone. She has very few enemies and ill-wishers. It has always been and will always be so. Absolutely anyone who sees her smile even once can easily let their guard down and not even notice when it happened. That's something to keep in mind too. Change her way of life. She finally has a chance, which must be taken, so that everything will be back to normal and the long-awaited justice will appear. While Rasal was obsessed with finding excuses for the situation, everyone was already discussing his horrible behavior and spreading rumors at breakneck speed. He was aware of the situation, but he was only thinking about restoring his reputation, not trying to apologize for his action, as usual though. It's for the best, so the girl can focus on her next steps without anyone distracting her. But there is one problem. She can't handle everything alone. She needs some kind of helper or at least a person to whom she can give small things to do. And then she has a brilliant idea, although at the same time, she has no confidence that it will work. She thought it would be a good idea to ask Resolu for help, so she could show him that she didn't resent him too much, and if he helped, she could count on his forgiveness. As time was very short, she did not think long. She called Linda and asked her to send this letter without the century to Mr. Resolu. She promised that she would tell everything later, and they would discuss everything for sure. Lately, she has started enveloping people. Most likely, it indicates the feelings of the interlocutor and his attitude towards her. Yellow, friendliness, red, anger. Now, such ability is very useful for her. There's a lot the girl doesn't realize yet, but maybe she got this power because she turned back time, but we'll have to see for ourselves. After just a few minutes, the assistant comes back and says that she also received a letter, but from whom exactly, no one knows. It can be found out after reading the letter. It will surely make something clear in it. What was her surprise when Aonir opens this letter and realizes that it came from her father? That's right, because in this time he is still alive. She was even surprised that she didn't think about it before, and until now, didn't come to him. In the letter, her father warned her that her sister would soon come to visit her. This time, the girl prepared for this moment very responsibly. She thought everything over and was ready for the meeting at any moment. Literally the next day, Floria arrives early in the morning. I had to pretend to be really happy to see her, and she did. Silky golden hair, eyes like two bright emeralds. She is literally unrecognizable even from afar. Now they are at the time when they see each other for the first time, or rather, after many years. They just forgot what each of them looked like and had to get acquainted almost all over again. Just at the moment when the sister starts to get excited about the meeting and says compliments, supposedly Aunir looks much better than she was described. Aunir epitomizes a horrible black aura. It's the first time she's seen something like that, and it's hardly any positive emotions and intentions. She was once more convinced that she should have nothing to do with this person. If she had known it the first time, she would never have called her to visit. And even if she had come to warn her, she would have done her best to make her leave as soon as possible. Instead of asking how her sister was doing, Floria starts talking about how many compliments she got during the road trip. Everyone constantly admired her hair, which she got from her mom, who was also a saint. It's impossible to believe that the girl didn't notice all this before and thought she was the best sister and how lucky she was to be with her. Floria used her position as a great saint. She had always done so, and no one blamed her for it. Although everyone knew the purpose of it, people were just in love with her looks and her sweet appearance. But few knew that behind it there was something that would repel each of them at once. Even though they had many happy times together, even then her sister always took advantage of her and did what was best for her. She was able to do it as discreetly as possible, and considering how gullible and naive Aunir was, it was easy to do so. Eventually, to surprise her, the girl said a polite hello but didn't give a single compliment, and that was on purpose. The sister was used to receiving a lot of nice words, but since she didn't hear anything like that, she was very surprised and upset. That's exactly what Aunir wanted. She wants to make sure that she doesn't get any good emotion during her time here. She will make her life as difficult as she can. This meeting is very different from the way it was in the past life. It is very interesting. What will be the consequences and whether the sister will notice this attitude to herself? Although even if she pretends that nothing like that happened, it is not excluded that in her mind she will already start to think of something and check it out. She will never take this attitude in her direction and believes that absolutely everyone she meets and does not see should admire her and say at least a few compliments in her direction. They started to smile sweetly at each other, but now, unlike how it was before, now the two of them are now very aware of what's going on, not one of them. Avenir is slowly becoming less kind, and it's already being noticed. She's going to have to be very careful, though perhaps she hasn't been interested in what others think of her for a long time now. Lastly, to spoil her mood completely, Aunir remembered her sister saying that she looked a lot like her mother. So, the girl says that even though they do have a very similar hair color to the past great saint, but her only daughter, it is she, Aunir, who will not let anyone call her mother but herself. She says that calling herself the daughter of a woman who is not her birth mom is very wrong of her and even rude. Floria literally had a black aura in the blink of an eye. She started making excuses that she didn't mean to be rude and explained that she just didn't think what she said. She tried to pretend to be a nice girl again, but it didn't work. At least her sister already knows very well how well someone hides their real face. Floria made it clear that she was very offended and started to leave without even wishing her a good day or walking her to her room. Floria turned on the actress again and nearly cried and started asking why her sister was being so cruel. After all, they are sisters who are supposed to help each other and not hurt each other. Aunir didn't keep silent. She reminded that if someone hadn't called herself her mother's daughter, it wouldn't have happened. Her sister calmed down and said that she was right. She apologized and said that it would never happen again. But it was clear from the look in her eyes that the conflict was clearly not over yet. She's going to try to get revenge and do something back. And lastly, she's going to tell me again how beautiful she is and how good she is at going after her dream of becoming a saint. Aunir tried her best to fake a smile, just so this conversation would finally come to an end. She had already wasted a lot of time on her and wanted to leave. And then said that if she continued to study hard, she could become a worthy candidate like herself. A few days had passed since then. They had already had a break from each other, and surprisingly, they hadn't even crossed paths or spoken. But in the meantime, Aunir was in her room, and suddenly someone knocked on her door. Linda comes in and asks if the mistress knows what her sister is doing. She has a red aura. It means she is in absolute rage. The girl asks what she means, and it turns out Floria is saying terrible things, and the assistant overheard her talking, which means her sister wants to ruin her reputation and isn't afraid to do it in her house. So something has to be done about it. But in her previous life, she tried her best to hide her true face from everyone. Very interesting what has changed since then. It's like she chose a different strategy. The assistant then elaborated on what she had heard, Floria claiming that her sister has been looking down on her lately and really disliking it, Everyone immediately felt sorry, and some even resented the mistress. Floria's plan is slowly working, and the assistant is very perturbed by it. She wants to help, but doesn't know how she can be of help yet. She asked to get into action as soon as possible. Otherwise, there was no telling what the girl was up to next, for it was obvious that this was just the beginning, and she had no plans to stop. Linda admitted that she had tried to explain to her sister that Mistress was not at all what she said she was, but she had just looked at her with a displeased face and gone off somewhere to do her own thing. The girl thanked for this information and promised that as soon as she came up with something, she would definitely let her know and they would solve the problem together. She started to remember very carefully all the things that could have started it all, namely, where her sister got such hatred, and it would probably be good to know about Floria's past, but the girl doesn't even know how to do it in the current situation. Asking her directly would be very strange. You need to think of something else. At this point, the assistant reiterated that although it was unknown what fate had prepared, she wanted the mistress to know that she was always at her side and would be there for her no matter what. The girl smiled and said that was exactly what she needed to hear. She thanked her and allowed her to rest for a few hours, for there was much more to come next. Such support motivates to make more steps forward, and of course, it is so much easier to cope with favorite difficulties. The girl knows that she is not alone and is not going to give up, so that at least not to disappoint those who believe in her. The girl went out for her morning walk, and if she had known she would meet her sister, she would have stayed in her room. She couldn't pass by. And of course she said hello, as if she had already succeeded, and everyone around her was against Anir. She then asked if her sister was going to the living room by any chance, to which the girl asked why she was going there and what she was asking that for. Sister said that all the candidates for sainthood were invited to the parlor for a tea party, and she was surprised no one told her about it. She laughed that her sister had been forgotten to be invited, though it was probably her doing. Usually a girl doesn't forget to be invited anywhere, but with her sister's appearance, it happened in some magical way. It's not surprising. Anir knows what's going on, and now she has to decide if she wants to go to the event, where most likely her sister has already prepared several traps in advance. There's no way everything will go smoothly, especially since she specified it herself and probably not just for a reason. At that moment, when the girl had not yet decided or given an answer, suddenly someone called her by name. They looked aside and saw a handsome guy. I wonder very much what she could do for him and why he came so early, for usually all important business is done in the afternoon, and few people have had time even to eat breakfast. I think she recognizes this guy. She even remembers his name, and it's clearly no one on staff. He looks really nice, like he came to visit. The fact was that it had been so long since they'd seen each other that Avenir hadn't expected to see him so tall. This guy's name is Steve. The girl was even surprised that she remembered his name and was able to recognize him the first time he didn't even have time to introduce himself. She remembers very well how when they were children, they were about the same height and were good friends. They spent most of their time together and considered each other best friends. Even though it was a long time ago, she enjoys remembering those wonderful times when there were not all these problems. Naturally, the sister could not miss such an opportunity. To meet a new handsome man, she asked her sister to introduce him, although she realizes that it would be nice to leave them alone and let them socialize. The girl said that they had met before she moved to the temple. It was a long time ago, and in fact, he could still be considered a friend. In that case, Floria has again allowed herself more than she would like. She says she wants to talk to him first, and then her sister can do it, although the guy only came to see one of them, and it's obviously not her. She smiled at him and told him that she was very happy to meet him. The girl started acting as if she fell in love with him at first sight and doesn't even hide it. She looks at him with such eyes as if she wants to talk for the rest of the day. She became very interested to know what purpose he had come here for, and of course, if he had a little free time, suggested that he join them for a tea party. He reacted very quickly and made it clear that he wasn't here to see her. The guy apologized and explained that he was here for a private meeting with Avenir, so some other time. He didn't even bother to hide that he didn't care about her. He didn't have to pretend to like her at first sight. Floria was very upset and couldn't believe that he was the first guy to say no, and so bluntly. After that, he approached Avenir, smiled, and confessed how long he had waited for this moment. Floria looks at it and feels superfluous. This is the first time in her life. Now she can't do anything for sure. He said that ever since then, he'd been thinking about her and dreaming of seeing her again. And finally, that beautiful day came. Steve put all his work aside just to see her after all these years and hear that beautiful, gentle voice. And so that they would not be interrupted by anyone else, the guy suggested to propose the conversation somewhere else. They had so much to discuss, and it would be better to choose a more suitable environment without unnecessary people. Of course, the girl happily agreed. She forgot about all the problems and began to think only about him. Very interesting, what he wants to discuss and why he could not warn about his visit in advance. And the sister at this point is so pissed off that she's already having thoughts of how to interfere with this beautiful date of theirs. She doesn't like the fact that she's not the center of attention and left out of it. Though it's possible that she invited him to ask him for a favor, she was looking for an assistant and didn't know who to choose. For this, she is very grateful to him, which means that the girl was just waiting for a return letter. And he didn't warn her and came as soon as he found out about her problems. Now I see what's going on. He's like a true friend. He's come to the rescue no matter what, and he's postponed all his business, not even knowing how long he'll have to stay here. In fact, although they know each other very well, after so many years when they meet, the girl feels very awkward, although she didn't think she would be embarrassed at all. He has gotten so much better looking and grown up during this time that he looks quite handsome. She even remembered that when they were still children, Steve had cried very much when his friend was ill. He often came running to her room to make sure she was not alone and bored. He was very worried about her and was afraid of losing such a good person. Avenir couldn't help herself and told him the story, thus making him very embarrassed. He asked her to stop. It was too embarrassing for him to remember his childhood behavior. As everyone has already learned, he is a friend of her childhood. Also, the guy is the second son of a noble family, whose territory was in the neighborhood of the territory of the girl's family. When Avenir was accepted into the temple as a candidate for sainthood, Steve went to the Academy of Knights. For 5 years, they only exchanged letters but never managed to meet in person. Now she's very sorry that she had to tear him away from the service, to which the guy replies that he did not really rest, so perceives this trip as a vacation. He said that with this, she only made him a gift and asked him not to think about it, and then asked him to tell her what the problem was and why she needed him here. Avenir is so much afraid to tell him the truth. She doesn't want to upset him. She's still thinking how much he needs to know. After all, there might be something worth hiding. He saw her doubts and asked her to tell everything as it really is, because they are not strangers to each other, and if he realizes that she is honest with him, it will be much more pleasant to help, and so he will know better what to do, will be able to offer options or ideas. And just a second later, she had a sudden change of plans. Decided not to tell him the truth at all and pretended it was something else, as if she'd had a bad dream and it was so believable, that she would never be able to see him or her father again. So she wanted to see him and make sure it was just a bad dream that had nothing to do with real life. She made up this legend very quickly and was even afraid to look him in the eyes so that he would not see a bit of deceit. At last, the girl apologized for calling him on such an occasion and promised that it would not happen again. She pretended to be embarrassed, but in fact she was, so she'd have to solve her own problems. And when he left, there was no way to call again. In response, Steve extends his hand to her and promises that he'd be happy to help allay those fears she just named. At such moments, she realizes that he is the right person to cherish and appreciate. He is ready for her to do anything. But it's a pity that she could not confess to him and tell the truth, thus deceived her best friend, and now it will be on her conscience. After a few minutes, he had an idea. The guy asked not to refuse. If of course she had time for it, he promised that she would like everything. After all, he had never been wrong yet, and he knew her very well. Meanwhile, her sister wasted no time. She gathered a whole team and told them that Avenir had been very cold to her since the first time they met, and they were related. The girl pretended to be very much bothered by it, and one would like to know what the real reason for this attitude on her part is, so she wants to continue to appear nice and saintly. A lot of people started to discuss this topic and support Floria. They even have a common opinion that Avenir is not the same as she used to be. She started to think only about herself and stopped helping everyone. And of course, not without the topic of the guy who suddenly came to visit her. They found out that those friends since childhood and surprisingly even think they're pretty good together. After that, a new topic and questions appeared. Since nice guys come to her, how can this be? Because the lady is together with Mr. Rasal, and most likely when he finds out about it, he will be very unpleasant. And maybe he will even blame everyone for the fact that no one informed him at once. He is considered very handsome and beautiful by everyone, no matter what. Even after that situation, everyone pretended that nothing happened. He is still the best gentleman for them, who is never wrong and always right. After that, the girls who are aware of the recent situation, they held on as usual for nutrition and told how he dared to act towards Avnir. Before they finally quarreled, he dared to raise his voice at her and grabbed her arm. Floria overhears all these conversations and thinks about how she can do better. She wants to use this information for her own purposes, but for now, there's nothing to latch onto. Then the girls began to discuss how awful it would be if such a beautiful couple broke up because of such a minor conflict. Although that's exactly what Floria wants, she's the only one who wouldn't mind that option. Meanwhile, the gentleman stands at the window in his office and doesn't know what's going on with his fiancée. He's never seen her the way she's been lately, and even thought that maybe she's already guessing about something. He's getting very angry that it is not as easy to work with her as it used to be, when she agreed to everything and believed every word he said. But now she has suddenly started to put her desire and opinion first, which makes it very difficult for him. Avenir has begun to drift away from him so much that it seems to him that this relationship will end, and he has done everything possible to make it happen, and he is surprised. For a few days, she was so easy to manipulate that he didn't even have to bother. She was literally in his cage and lived by his rules, unaware of anything, naively thinking it was better that way. If things go on like this, he won't be able to control her. The daughter of a great saint has too much value, and he shouldn't let her go. If he wants things to be the way he wants them to be, now he has to work very hard for it, and there is no guarantee that she will let him. The only goal he's set for himself from now on is to put her in her place as soon as possible. But I wonder how he'll react when he realizes that it's absolutely impossible, no matter how hard he wants to and tries. A few minutes later, there is a knock at his door, and as it turns out, of course, Floria has come to see him. She comes to see him more often on purpose and takes up all his free time. The guy guesses who came to him and immediately allowed him to enter without asking who was behind the door, and it could have been just helpers or some guests. The girl greeted the gentleman and said that she was very happy to see him, but this time she didn't just come to ask how he was doing. She knows he won't refuse a conversation, at the very least because of politeness. He's a man who won't be put off by those he can benefit from. Even if he wasn't very happy to see her, he would still let her in and ask her what she could do to help, even though her abilities as a saint were not as outstanding as her sister's. And the most surprising thing is that before coming to his office, the girl did not even tell her sister about it. She thought that such a thing could not be warned, although most likely the guy himself would not mind that this meeting remained a secret. He immediately asked how he could help, and said that he would be happy to do so if he had the opportunity and time. Floria smiled. She felt that the conversation would be a success. She had already succeeded in getting this man to like her, and that was a very good sign. Out of politeness, the girl began to apologize for suddenly distracting him from his important work and promised that such a thing would not happen again. Just this time, she could not do otherwise and had to come unannounced. One of the reasons why the guy smiles at her and doesn't mind talking, she'll be able to find out what's going on with Avenir. Supposedly they're sisters and should know everything about each other, though he highly doubts it. Floria starts begging him for help, even though she hasn't even explained what happened. It's important for her to realize in advance that he won't refuse and will definitely help, no matter what happens. It turns out they're just looking for mutual benefit, but only one of them is likely to get it, and that person will be Floria. She came to tell me that her sister has become very cold to her and she doesn't like it, because they are a family that should support each other and stay on good terms no matter what. The guy heard this phrase and immediately got upset. He realized it means that since they have a conflict, his fiancée didn't tell her anything. And meanwhile, the girl continues to say that she heard that recently the Lord also quarreled with Aunir, and they have some misunderstandings. Accordingly, she has a suspicion that this has affected their communication. So the two of them realized they couldn't get anything out of each other. They had the same problem, so now they're in this together. After a long conversation, an active process of reasoning began. There were guesses, additional questions, and some options to somehow approach the girl. Floria believes that if they become a team and try to solve the two problems together, it will be much faster and easier than acting alone. If combining all the knowledge and information they have, it will be the most reasonable solution to the problem. No matter how long they try to talk about it and speculate about it, They will never know that fighting her won't work. Aunir has gotten to know each of them better than they know themselves. She can't be defeated anymore. Aunir will not forgive anyone, will not be comfortable for anyone, will not help or do anything that could ruin her reputation again. The girl is determined to put herself first and destroy everyone in her path who once dared to think something against her. Maybe that sounded too harsh, but that's pretty much it. She's at least determined to get revenge and make things fair. And at some point, they have a general idea that if they don't go to her together, Avenir supposedly won't be able to say no to either of them so easily. They think the girl will worry about something and won't be so confident anymore. But just a few minutes later, a question came from the gentleman asking if Floria knew what the real reason was that they had quarreled with the brides. She replied that she didn't know anything, to which he advised her to stay out of it. But did those words mean that he wanted to act individually and wasn't going to form a team? The guy reads that it's their problem and no one has the right to get involved. Those words sounded pretty clear, but a little ambiguous. It's like they just agreed on one thing, and he's already telling me to stay out of it and wants to figure it out on his own. He even said that Floria had more important things to do than sorting out relationships from others, and then slowly began to walk her down the hallway. The girl starts to resent how she can focus on something else when the family is in such a mess, especially since she thinks he's the only person she can turn to for help. Lastly, lest this conversation should last another half hour, he hinted that he was a very busy man, and she had better ask someone else. Then the door closed and she was alone in the hallway, feeling the same way again as yesterday. Lately, she'd been too pushed and put in her place. The gentleman began to think about everything that had just happened. He hadn't expected this nice girl to be so intrusive. Eventually, he realized that she's no use to him. He's gonna have to do everything himself, and it's really upsetting him. You need to take time to think things through. The situation is getting more and more complicated every day. In the meantime, some girls appeared in the corridor. They started discussing the topic that soon there would be a very important event, and this year it was something worth trying to work on. It was not clear from these words, but she had already made up her mind and began to smile as if her sister would soon regret very much that she had dared to behave like that, especially in the presence of other people. Meanwhile, Aunir is in no hurry. She does everything calmly, without aggression. The girl just knows that she will win in any case and no one has a chance, even if they all together try to harm her. She is always one step ahead, and it will always be like that. Linda's assistant is just planning to talk about the very event her sister just heard about in the hallway. On this day, everyone should present a gift to God. It is held annually, and since Avenir is the closest to the saint, she plays a special role on this day. At that moment, she was very much frightened by the fact that this was the year something was going to happen that would leave her with the most horrible of memories. She even feels that something terrible is going to happen at this year's festivities. A very bad premonition has emerged. Everyone knows that this holiday was not an easy one always, but the helper decided to calm down and said that everything would be fine. She would help and make sure that everything would go more or less calmly and safely. Aunir thanked her for that. It would have been much harder without such support. But even such small, pleasant words had great power. Linda had become a very important person to her lately. After that, she remembered that all the problems in her life had started after that holiday. She hadn't even thought about it then. But most likely, everything had happened just because of Floria's fault. So, this time it is impossible to allow something like that. The girl has all possible information. She can outwit each of them. The main thing is not to be nervous and do everything carefully. In this, she will help her plan and self-confidence. You just need to remember that these people deserve, and not such a punishment as she came up with. They did much worse, and if the girl was very vindictive and cruel, it would have been just enough to destroy them. She just isn't like those villains who only pretend to be holy people. During the conversation, the girl learned another very interesting information. It turns out that Linda from childhood admired the great Saint Felicia, who was the mother of Avenir. But unfortunately, it so happened that she was not able to become a candidate saint. She was left just to serve the great temple, so she spent most of her life here. Aunir never thought about it and didn't even know that her assistant had the exact same dream as her. It's impossible to imagine how she feels when she sees someone else's dream come true and she never will. Moreover, she has to help her mistress in this, remembering herself in the past when she didn't read to be in her shoes either. The girl said that of course she was very pleased to be so admired by her mom, but unfortunately there was nothing to be done about it anymore. The assistant replied that she didn't say it to be pitied. She was just talking about her past so they would know each other better. Plus, she is honored to serve as one of the candidates, and this is her first party, so she wants to do her best to make it a success. In that case, Mistress suggested that they try together, and since they were already a team, why not celebrate and have a small tea party to celebrate it? I can't fool her this time, no matter how hard she tries or how many helpers she has. It still won't be enough against what her sister's options are. She can try all she wants, but in the end, there will only be one winner. Meanwhile, it was time to think about what she wanted for lunch. The assistant asked if there were any requests, but she could come up with something new herself. If you think back to the times before the rebirth, not long before the holiday itself, my sister would constantly, as if on purpose, remind them how special a holiday they were looking forward to and how much she was looking forward to it. And also, to become worthy of the title of Saint Maiden, they had to make a special effort at this celebration. So Floria always hoped for her help, as if she were waiting for something and constantly reminded her of it. At that time, the younger sister had just become a candidate for sainthood, so pretended like she was a little weaker and said that as long as her sister was around, she really wanted to be helpful to the temple. She came every day and asked to try together. At that time, the older sister never refused, and the younger sister knew it, thus successfully manipulating her all the time. Once Avenir cooked some food and it happened that a man was poisoned by it, they tried to save him for a long time, but nothing happened. Although the girl had not planned anything like that, she had no idea how it could happen. It's only now we can assume it was her sister who did it. She could well have put her up, and she did it on purpose. The girl was accused by everyone around and even considered a traitor for some time. It was very hurtful for her, and she could not even say anything in her defense. There was even such a thing that people thought to exclude her from the candidate saints. Then the girl thought that her end had come, but by some miracle this decision was silenced. Meanwhile, today was the day when her sister should approach her and remind her of the upcoming event. She even did so at exactly the same time as then. Unsurprisingly, she said all the same. It was her first feast, and if it was okay with her sister, she would like to prepare the dish with her. Aunir immediately noticed her black aura, though even without that, she already knew it wasn't to be. The girl smiled sweetly, immediately apologized, and explained that this holiday is special for all clergymen. And since she's a big part of the event, she'd like to do it alone so she doesn't get distracted. So she has to say no, and all she has to do is pretend like she believes in her sister and thinks she can handle it. Floria was very frightened. She didn't expect rejection, and now she doesn't know what else to say to possibly change her sister's mind. In fact, the girl refuses to even think about doing anything with her sister. She remembers very well how it ended last time, so she won't even let her near her workplace. She started to pretend like she didn't know how to do anything, and she was nervous, and she was hoping for support, but now she was failing. Avenir didn't give in and replied that there was nothing wrong with it, and besides, there were many other candidates who would be able to help. And then she didn't even say goodbye and just went about her business, thus making it clear that her help was not to be counted on. Floria Base is left alone. She has been turned down once again, and it won't be the last time she has to deal with this ceiling. Meanwhile, there's some guy walking towards her who looks a lot like the person they're going to cook food for. She realized this was her last chance and decided to stop him. The girl is already up to something, and it wouldn't be surprising if she told him something about her sister that would affect the outcome of the event. She apologized and asked to hear one very small request. She even gave him a little hug to make him embarrassed and definitely not able to go anywhere. The lad's cheeks flushed. He clearly wasn't ready for such beautiful, especially from a candidate for sainthood. She began to tell him that she had been feeling very lonely and unneeded lately, on purpose to cause him some regret. And at the same time, she averted her sinister gaze and mentally thought that if that was the case, Aunir would really regret not helping her favorite sis. Meanwhile, Avenir has everything very coherent. She has prepared a pretty good recipe in advance and has started cooking the dish. During the feast, each candidate should present her special soup, which should be much better than what ordinary people eat. It should be something divine, both in appearance and taste. The girl used to cook it according to the instructions of the groom. Now she understands which ingredients are better to add and which ones are better to refuse, and so far everything is going fine. When suddenly the assistant Linda arrives, she apologized for coming unannounced. She didn't interfere with such an important process. She just wanted to say that she had done everything. She had done all her errands and could now do something else for her. The girl was very glad and said that for the time being she could rest. Since everything has to be perfect and perfect on this day, she has no right to make a mistake. Moreover, No one should appear in this kitchen but the two of them. The next assignment was, don't let anyone in here. Make sure no one did anything suspicious. It turns out that Anir was so responsible that she decided to prepare the soup the day before the event. Now it is clear why she was so worried that no one would put anything in it. Even if it is the best, it is not excluded that someone will try to spoil it. It's better if no one knows about it at all and everyone thinks the girl hasn't even started cooking. Meanwhile, the day had begun when everything had to be ready. This morning, everyone was busy. The estate was completely quiet and no one could even be seen or heard. The long-awaited day of the celebration, which everyone has been waiting for so long, today everyone tried to wear light-colored clothes, because in the dark appears, it is the same as to show disrespect for traditions. Linda had been very careful all this time to see that no one should come near the soup, as was the request of Mrs. And so far, nothing bad has happened. Everything is under control. At least they think so. Besides, the girl is wearing a particularly beautiful outfit today, which incredibly emphasizes her beauty. Everyone has already complimented her, and of course the first person to compliment her is Linda. She can't stop admiring this beautiful outfit. It further understands the mood and adds to the confidence that everything will go very well as planned. A lot of people gathered around, all interested to see who will be the winner, because as it is known, the author of the best dish will get additional chances to become a saint. It's very interesting how her sister has coped. Instead of being nervous, she's actively socializing with everyone as if she's doing well too. It's very unexpected. Maybe everyone's just trying to put on a calm face in front of the gentleman, and he's just arrived. Strangely, instead of apologizing and saying hello to the bride at least a little, he did it towards her sister first and did so in a way that Avnir just didn't notice, even though she was standing literally a meter away from them. Floria says she can't wait for the party to start already, as if she really tried hard and wants to do damage. But something tells me she's just waiting for her sister to fall into the trap. She's probably already prepared for her. Judging by her sinister look, there's no doubt about it. And yet it's a very good thing that her sister is prepared for this much. Anir doesn't know what she has prepared for her, but obviously nothing good is to be expected. Avenir won't let her do anything this time. She is ready for any trials and traps. She doesn't doubt that there will be any, but unfortunately she doesn't know what they will be. But unfortunately she doesn't know which ones. And now it's her turn. The man who's supposed to taste her soup invites her over and asks her to tell him about the dish. The girl promised that it would be very tasty. She tried very hard and sure. He will like everything. Otherwise, it just can't be otherwise. Every year on this special day, the best candidate for sainthood must present her soup first, which means that Anir is still in her place and her reputation has not deteriorated. She is still considered one of the best. Floria is watching everything very carefully, as if she already knows that something is about to happen. But the man says this soup has such a nice and rich flavor. And as for the presentation, it was very brief but effective. He ended up praising the Anir and said he didn't expect anything else from it. She replied that she was honored to receive his praise and promised that she would try to surprise and delight him even more next time. He really had a very perfect exit. Everything was very harmonious, calm. Even the competitors recognized that. It turns out the sister didn't work out, and it's weird that she was expecting something and hoping for bad things to happen. Floria is upset and now doesn't know what to do next. Was she really hoping that without Rasolsan's help, Anir wouldn't be able to do anything, and even without traps? She couldn't handle it. It turns out that she had gone to the room where her sister's soup was beforehand and remembered exactly how she had managed to spoil it. But apparently Anir had thought it through so well that she hadn't succeeded anyway. Her sister had done the same thing as that time. The girl made 2 pots of soup on purpose, one left in the same place where she cooked it, and hid the other. Everything was thought up from the very beginning, and in fact, the idea was suggested to her by her assistant, for which the mistress is very grateful. She even admitted that she would not have thought of it herself. In the end, the villainous sister's plan didn't work. Now I can see why she was looking that way and expecting bad things to happen. Meanwhile, it was Floria's turn. She also cooked a dish, and I wonder how she did it, since she didn't even have anyone to help her. A man begins to taste her dishes, and from the first spoonful, realizes that there is one ingredient added to it that is strictly forbidden to be added and generally forbidden to be consumed by anyone who wants to become a saint. He began to get very indignant and yell at her, for it was such a strict rule that he didn't think anyone could be ignorant of it. The girl had not yet had time to realize that she had been yelled at and continued to rejoice as if she were about to be praised. Then, she realizes that it didn't work out. This soup is not only unpalatable, It totally doesn't fit the criteria that has already been established for over a decade, and in her shoes, she was ashamed not to know it. Even her sister wondered how they could have missed that information and added a forbidden ingredient. In response, Floria starts yelling that she would never have added that ingredient. In response, the man starts to get even more indignant that she also dares to justify what she did. It's unclear why she's saying this, and maybe this is her sinister plan. Can she really say now that it's not her fault, and she's being set up by someone else like her sister? Everyone immediately starts looking at her with suspicion. No one understands if she's cheating or not. And what's the point of it all? The thing is that the soup, which is customary to prepare for this holiday, should not contain animal products. God was kind to all living creatures, especially to pigs. In normal life, there are no activities on this occasion, but specifically on the holiday, this ingredient is forbidden. Floria doesn't know what to say anymore, and really, it's very interesting to see if she really has no idea how this could have happened. She doesn't even deny that maybe the same ingredient could have been in her soup by mistake, although it doesn't make sense anymore. The soup doesn't fit, and she is clearly far from winning. There is no point in fighting for one of the worst places. The girl starts crying. She no longer realizes how everything looks from the outside, and that she has been holding up all the other candidates for a long time now. In fact, the very ingredient she wanted to put in her sister's soup and ended up framing herself. At the very last moment, when the girl had no hope for anything, she was suddenly defended by Aunir, who asked her to forgive her sister and explained that Floria had recently become a candidate and might have forgotten about this rule. As her sister, she takes full responsibility for what happened, because she should have told you about the rules, but she didn't. Then the man asked her to come closer, as if he wanted to talk about it and get a final understanding of the situation. It turns out he just wanted to remind them that each of them is responsible for themselves, and relying on someone else is not the best method to become one of the best. So he would not tolerate such a blunder again. All these words were directed towards the younger sister, and he praised the elder sister. She had shown herself very worthy, as a real leader. In just a few minutes, there were discussions. People realized that Floria is not the saint she tries to show herself to be, because if she was a real saint, she wouldn't have let go of such elementary mistakes. But they already looked at the older sister, Aunir, in a completely different way. Today, she had done a very noble thing, trying to save another person. Hearing these words, the younger sister could not believe that today things had gotten worse. She had finally ruined her reputation and wanted to turn back the clock to make things right. But unfortunately, that's no longer possible. People have seen who is really who is faking it, and who really deserves to be a saint. Floria is starting to get very angry at herself. If she had done nothing, things would have been much better. At the very least, she wouldn't have embarrassed herself and wouldn't be the worst. As suddenly, she walks up to her sister and asks her what color her broth was. A very strange question, but it's like she's trying to salvage the situation and learn something. Aunir didn't expect it and said that she didn't even pay attention to it. She said that today she had just made a new soup because she was afraid that yesterday's soup might have spoiled, and asked why such a question was suddenly asked, because it didn't matter anymore. Floria pretended that she was just curious, but it was obviously about something else entirely, and the question was definitely asked for a reason. She started to get even angrier at herself and realized that the more she tried to get back at her sister, the more the bad things came back at her own direction. Since there's nothing to change, she just promised herself that next time it would be different. She wouldn't make the same mistakes and her sister would regret it. Floria can't wait to finally ruin her life and get rid of her main rival.